Hello, Abigail here with the Tarotscopes for Gemini season, Capricorn, Sun, Moon, and Rising. My Capricorns, this season is very transitory. All the transits are happening. All the planets are shifting. Two of our great malefic and the great benefic shift signs. All the personal planet shift signs. Mercury shift signs twice. I'm going to go through the chronological order, but it is important to know getting into this that it is a lot, and it creates not a seriousness to Gemini season because I don't think that, but like a quickness that is even quick for Gemini. There's just so much happening all at once, and it really does color what's going on. But let's kind of get down into the thick of it. This is also your ruler shifting into a new sign, which is a big deal. Yes, will Saturn retrograde back into Pisces for a little bit, and then in the new year officially be in Aries for the rest of its transit? Yes, but this is the beginning of the end, so buckle up, my Saturn ruled people. So let's get into the kind of timeline for this. We start off on May 24th. This is at the edge of the day. So if you're in a different time zone other than EST, this might happen on the 25th, but it's like at 11:30 something p.m. So we're right on the edge. But then we get that Saturn entrance into Aries. Like I said, big deal. We still have a retrograde and another Pisces moment, but this is the beginning of this transit. Then the very next day, Mercury moves into Gemini, where it is domicile. Because Mercury doesn't have retrogrades, it moves really quickly, actually. So we're going to get another Mercury ingress into another sign, but it is domicile for a couple of weeks, which is really nice to get kind of that free flowing Mercury energy. And the very next day, on the 26th, we have a new moon that is also Mercury ruled in Gemini, and we get this lovely domicile Mercury for that. I will say there is a trine to Pluto. So it's not bad, but it's definitely kind of shifting the energy from really light and playful to like, let's go look at the underworld, folks. But that domicile Mercury will come in clutch and give us a bit of support. So even if it's hard, we're not kind of out fluttering in the wind, as it were. Then on the 6th of June, we get Venus entering into Taurus, another domicile moment. Yes, Venus is finally out of detriment and into Taurus, which I am biased because I have a Venus in Aries. So I'm like, what do you mean? But I also do love a domicile Venus. So it's smoother waters after the, kind of ups and downs of this early part 2025, which I think we can all appreciate and enjoy. And then on the 8th, we get Mercury going into Cancer. And the very day after that, we get Jupiter, the great benefic, going into Cancer as well. This is a 12-month cycle. It is in Cancer where it is considered to be exalted. So another kind of like, finally out of detriment. No hate to a Jupiter and Gemini, but it does feel as though Jupiter and Gemini plays a lot of jokes that may or may not be appreciated. Jupiter and Cancer is a bit more consistent, more nurturing, more expansive, which I think we're all ready for. And this is all happening in your opposing sign of Cancer. So it has a lot to do with you. You're going to have a Jupiter opposition. You're going to have a bunch of lunar oppositions, solar opposition, Mercury opposition. So, a lot of stuff is going to be kind of brought up for you. So just be aware that there's kind of a pull from the past and you're going to have to face some stuff, just so you know. And then we have full moon in Sagittarius where something similar happens with that new moon, except just with the lunar nodes. We get a square with the lunar nodes, which can feel very eclipsy, but we also have the rulership of that exalted Jupiter. So it's an interesting kind of play off where we have this really intense square moment. It's a T-square as well, so it's very, very spicy. It's not a T-square; it's a grand cross. So there's just like this massive kind of impasse in the sky, and then we have this beautiful Jupiter come in to support it. So I do think these moons, especially in Gemini season, are going to be incredibly helpful for working through stuff, because we get to face hard things with some really great planetary support. And then on the 17th, we have Mars entering Virgo. Mars in Virgo can be a little hypercritical and mean about the small details. Might point out that you have a stain on your pants or that your zipper's not unzipped. But Mercury in Virgo is going to be really investigative and just turn off that little thing that popped up on my screen. Really investigative and really get to the point and find all the little details that we maybe have been ignoring. And maybe, and Mars gets a little frustrated with having to dig through the details. But I do think, especially after the Mars retrograde, this is kind of the gathering back of our information and knowledge and seeing what has happened and, what got us here. So while it might be a bit tedious for Mars, it is necessary. And then moving into your reading, which is very cancery. It's like, yes, everything is opposing you. Not like in a negative way, but as in like you're gonna have to face a bunch of stuff. So your archetype card is the ocean. And I love this because it is about that cancer expansion. It is about kind of leaning into your opposing sign. When things are at an impasse with um, Saturn and things are very kind of Capricornian, then there's a locking of horns. An outlet for finding a way forward is very often Cancer energy. So it is time to dig into the vastness of the ocean. I think for some of you, getting to an ocean, very important. Finding yourself in salty water next to the tides. Me being like, if only. I desperately need to be by the sea at some point. Um, so take that time, be thoughtful of the things that you want and need. You don't really sense that this is a season. It's another one of those seasons, unlike Taurus season, where you're not going to get a whole lot done. I feel like there was more ability to get more done in Taurus season, unlike the rest of this year. But in this season, it really feels, especially with all of these events happening all at once, it really does feel as though we're kind of at the mercy of the universe again. So it's time to focus on what we can engage in, what we can control, what we can manage, what we can and cannot do. Um, and a lot of things like nature and the vastness of the ocean can put that in perspective for us. It's also about, entering into our internal worlds and going into the depths of self and really asking ourselves, how we wish to exist and what we want and what gives us the feeling of standing on the edge of the ocean and looking at the horizon. And if you're in if you're in a place in your life where you don't feel like that, I think it's time to start pursuing it. And no, not everything's a day on the beach with a beautiful ocean, but if you can't find those moments, what's the point? I love this because this card flashed me, and whenever I get card flashed with me, it ends up in my hand. It flashed me, and it's the ruler, the moon, the ruler of Cancer. So I do think these lunations are really important for you. The full moon, Sagittarius, the Mercury ruled Gemini moon. All of these I think are really important for you to touch base on. But I think the most important kind of tagging off of that ocean moment is the inner world. You really have to check in. You really need to check in. Mars's opposition to your stuff really did a number on you. And so it's really time to tap back in to be like, okay, what happened in the earlier part of this year? How did this affect me? What is it bringing up for me? What does my internal world look like now versus what it looked like before? And, what parts do we like? What parts are really stressful and not being helpful? I especially think too, because I find that a lot of us really heavily rely, especially on old coping mechanisms during retrogrades, especially Venus retrograde. It's also going to be a need to review your coping mechanisms, to review which ones are functioning. And maybe they were doing great and helpful during the Venus retrograde, but now you're not in the Venus retrograde. So maybe we need to kind of pull things back a little bit and kind of get things back in the place where they belong and not scattered across the world. Also, by the end of Gemini season, you will have a trine with Mars in Virgo. And then into Cancer season, you'll end up with more of those aspects. So what can you get done, especially at the end? I think this whole kind of like moon card at the beginning of the spread is like what you have to do in order to get things done once you get that nice Virgo Mars trine. And this is kind of why I said I think we're going to be pulling up a lot, from the past, is we do have a Six of Elixirs or Six of Cups. And this is about going to the past. Sometimes it's about going to the past to meet ourselves. Sometimes it's about going to the past to find answers. Sometimes it's going to the past to speak to our, younger self and to reassure ourselves. This might be an odd belief, but I do believe that we live on multiple planes of time, and that we can reach back and comfort ourselves even as we are technically ahead in time. I, in fact, had an experience like this as a child. I cried out for help, and a voice answered me. And years later, I realized that it was me. I thought it was God, and it ended up being me. And I think whether this story resonates with you or not, I think it's this idea that we, in some ways, can go back, even if it's not into that actual physical moment, and speak to parts of ourselves that are still hurt or still in a childhood of sorts. It's also about going back and seeing where these coping mechanisms have come from and which ones are actually stemming from something that's functional and which ones are at their base just not functional. They were for a very specific time in your life, and now we need to move on and shift those things up. But yeah, go back down memory lane this Gemini season, especially when things feel particularly overwhelming. Go back down memory lane, find some little trinkets, some little bits of information to help you as you kind of sit in this moment of not having control, because the ocean is vast and probably one of the more terrifying things as a human being, both terrifying and beautiful, but we know less about the ocean than we know about pretty much anything else. And then we have a lovely little ace of blades, little ace of swords. And I love this. It really screams, domicile. One second, my dog's yelling. Sorry, he's a little antsy tonight. Ace of Blades really screams that Mercury domicile. It feels like it's going to bring some really fresh, beautiful energy into your Gemini season. But it's not like get going, do stuff now energy. It's like having the initial thought that we're going to carry into the next few seasons. I think your investigations into the past are going to bring you some really good answers that are a really great place to start heading into, let's say, Cancer season, Leo season. And I really love this because it feels very oceany to me. We have a very beautiful, very lovely Empress. And I think all of this kind of inner work, all of this self-reflection is in aid of coming home to self, of really coming to terms with the beauty of who we are and also accepting the beauty of parts of ourselves that maybe we don't like so much. So often, and this is something I was really hyper-focused on, raised as a woman in society, is this constant idea of changing or fixing or shifting, even if it's like deeply subconscious. And like on a conscious level, you're like garbage, but on a subconscious level, you do participate. But coming to terms that there are some parts of yourself that just are what they are. And it's a waste of time to try to change it. And it doesn't really matter. It's not hurting anybody. The only people it's bothering are people who like to take too much energy or criticize people because they're weak and insecure. So it's time to really just be like, you know what? This thing right here, it's what I got this lifetime. And like I might want to prove a thing here or there, but it's really about coming down into your body, trusting your instincts, trusting your needs, believing your body when it tells you something, believing your intuition when your body is like, I have a need. Instead of being like, no, that need is wrong. What would happen if you met those needs? And if your answer is like, well, I would get fat or I would get lazy, firstly, who cares if you get fat? And secondly, and this is coming from someone with had a serious eating disorder, so it's something I'm working on too. But who cares if I get lazy? Laziness doesn't exist. There are very few people I know that are actually lazy. Most people are traumatized. So yeah, accept that when your body wants to rest, let it rest. Who cares? Your apartment will get cleaned another day, and also, considering the state of the world, is that the biggest problem we have? And then I do love this. It is, I shouldn't say I love it, because it's complicated. But I do think that this card is going to really help us release things. And it's a difficult card to kind of grapple with sometimes, but it's the Five of Pentacles. And a lot of times people interpret this as like a loss of money and loss of resource. And I do feel there's a sense of being less resourced because of how much is being thrown at you this season. But I also think it is you looking back, going inward, and recognizing where you've been disappointed, where your emotional and physical and spiritual investments have not come to fruition. And it's that feeling of being like, geez, I like invested so much into this, and this is what I have to show for it. And it's not your fault. Things just didn't turn out. Um, but it's hard to recognize the disappointment. It's also, I think, if you haven't fully let the impact of the Venus retrograde hit you, recognizing where people have just effed up and made your life harder and disappointed you and ruined relationships. This is the time to be like, yeah, it really sucks and I hate it. And I'm really upset about it. And that's okay. The next card isn't much more helpful, which is why I was distracted earlier. We have a 5 of blades. People are still going to be disappointing. People are still going to be petty and they're going to pick fights. But it is really about coming home to yourself and knowing yourself well enough to know the people that you want to be around. And also letting yourself feel the pain and disappointment when people are disappointing and painful. And not trying to make the best of it and move forward. Some things we just have to sit with and process, and that's just how it is. But yeah, that is my reading for Gemini season. It is going to be something else. I am excited for the Empress. I do think there is a really delightful sense of self coming. And I think this is also being pushed forward by that Aries energy. Aries is a really spicy warrior type. And sometimes we forget that it can be fun to fight. So, lock in, engage with the energy of your ruler and exploring what that means for you while also kind of taking a trip down memory lane to kind of clear out the cobwebs and meet yourself where you were maybe a while ago. Anyways, my loves, if you have any questions or comments, pop them below. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you in a different space and time. Blessed Gemini season.